The enigma of the cursed portrait, a haunted art mystery. The thick fog had rolled in that evening, creeping through the narrow streets of the small town of Wyncliffe, where old houses clung to the sides of a jagged hill like ghosts of forgotten eras. The moon hung low, a ghostly sliver in the sky, barely illuminating the path to the once grand Ashford estate. Its ivy-clad stone walls loomed against the darkened sky, windows shattered, and doors left to rot in silence. Inside, in a dust-covered parlor, the fire had long since gone cold, leaving the room in a chill that seemed to gnaw at the bones. The only light came from a single lamp flickering on a wooden table. Shadows writhed on the walls, as if the room itself was alive with whispers, moving in time to the eerie creaks of the house's ancient frame. Margaret Halloway, a historian and art appraiser with a reputation for solving mysteries that defied reason, was here at the invitation of her old mentor, Professor Alistair Gray. He had spoken of a portrait, an exquisite painting that had once graced the great halls of Ashford Estate, a portrait so mysterious that rumors of a curse had surrounded it for generations. Margaret stepped forward, her heart pounding as her gaze fell on the canvas that dominated the far wall. The portrait was exquisite, too exquisite. Painted in the late 1700s, it depicted a woman dressed in dark, flowing robes, her gaze fixed upon the viewer with an intensity that sent shivers down Margaret's spine. The woman's eyes gleamed unnaturally, as if hiding a secret within their depths. But it wasn't just her gaze that unsettled Margaret. It was the coldness in the air, the palpable sense of dread that clung to the room, that whispered of something far darker than simple superstition. "Ah, you found it," a voice rasped from the shadows. Margaret turned to see Professor Gray, his face drawn with worry, his hands trembling as they gripped the back of a chair. His once sharp eyes were now clouded with fear, as if the weight of years of secrets was too much to bear. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The room seemed to close in around them, and Margaret felt a chill that sank deeper than the cold stone walls could account for. "What's happened, Alistair? What's the truth about this portrait?" Professor Gray's face twisted in discomfort. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "There's a story, a dark story tied to this painting. They say the woman in the portrait, Eliza Ashford, died under mysterious circumstances. But before her death, her beauty was said to captivate everyone who laid eyes upon her, and with it, a strange power. Whoever stared into her eyes would begin to lose their grip on reality. Some would vanish without a trace, others, driven mad. Over time, the portrait was locked away, hidden from view. But it never stopped its curse. It's only gotten stronger." Margaret stepped closer to the portrait, drawn despite herself. The air grew colder still, and she felt her breath catch in her throat. There was something alive about the painting, a flicker of movement in the woman's eyes. Her lips, which had once been perfectly still, now seemed to twitch. A faint, almost imperceptible smile? "No," Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. "It can't be." But even as she spoke, the room seemed to darken. The flame of the lamp sputtered violently, then died completely, plunging them into a suffocating blackness. Margaret's pulse quickened, and the faint sound of soft footsteps echoed from the darkness, distant yet closing in. A cold hand grasped her shoulder from behind. The scream that tore from Margaret's throat was swallowed by the walls of Ashford Estate. The next moment, the room was bathed in light once more, and Professor Gray was gone, leaving nothing behind but the weight of the silence. Panic surged through Margaret as she spun around, searching for any sign of her mentor, but the room remained empty. Her eyes returned to the portrait, but it was no longer just a painting. The woman in the frame seemed to grow, her form stretching out of the canvas, her eyes now full of malice, her smile wide and unforgiving. "You shouldn't have looked," a voice whispered, as though emanating from the painting itself. In that moment, Margaret realized the truth. The curse had not only claimed the lives of those who had once beheld the portrait, it was now after her. Desperate, she backed away, her eyes still locked on the cursed painting as she stumbled toward the door, heart racing. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet, There creaks a grim chorus as the temperature continued to drop. The portrait's eyes followed her every step. Outside, the fog had thickened, shrouding the estate in a dense, suffocating mist. Margaret knew she couldn't escape. Whatever this thing was, it was already inside her mind, weaving itself into the fabric of her thoughts. She could hear its voice now, calling her name over and over. "Margaret! Margaret! You cannot run. You cannot hide." But it was not just the portrait that had power. It was Ashford Estate itself. The walls of the house seemed to close in on her, and she realized with a sickening certainty, the portrait was not merely cursed. The curse had infected the house, the land, the very air itself. And now it was taking her, piece by piece, just as it had taken so many before her. As the fog swallowed her, Margaret understood the cruel twist of fate that awaited anyone who dared to uncover the secrets of the Ashford Estate. Once you saw the cursed portrait, it was only a matter of time before you became part of it.